Well, the US election race is very intense. We just had the recent attempt on Donald Trump. And now Joe Biden is even, well, the speculation is he's thinking about resigning. That's what the rumors are, or at least not running for the next election. So today, what I'm going to be looking at is I'm taking a look at the chart of Kamala Harris to get an understanding if she could be the front runner for this election, or could she somehow, you know, be in office for a short period of time or a longer period of time. That's what we're going to be looking at in this astrology video. So this should be quite informative. I'm going to tell you some of the strengths in the astrology chart and then some of the weaknesses as well from my point of view. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. This is Vedic sidereal astrology if you're new to this. So this is different than Western tropical astrology. Your sign may be different using this method. If you're interested in a personal private reading, please check down below for details. And also, I want to remind you all that astrology readings are for entertainment purposes only. I am just giving my interpretation of the astrological data. So that's, we got to give that in these videos. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Kamala Harris for a moment. And I'm going to pull up the chart in just a moment here. But a few things I wanted to bring up. I do like to look at the numerology in my astrology readings just to get a lot of, what the confluence is kind of showing with as far as what change is happening. So with Kamala, sorry, she's a 5 life path, which shows that it's a lifetime of adventure. There might even be a lot of risk, a lot of changes, a lot of freedom. It's kind of an exciting life path to be in. And then we have the actual personal year cycle. Everybody's in a personal year depending on the year. And the personal year, by the way, it goes from from your birthday, not necessarily January when the year starts. So, for example, in Kamala's her example, she's still in a one personal year until October, which is really good for new beginnings, new projects, even leadership calling. So right away, we know that this is a very important year for Kamala. The rising nakshatra for Kamala is going to be Mrigasira, which is the Orion constellation. The Shakti, or the power associated with that nakshatra, is called Prana Shakti, which means the power to give fulfillment. And it also gives somebody the ability to win support among their peers. She's a Gemini ascendant, adaptable and flexible, curious, all those sort of mercurial qualities, witty, restless, energetic, independent, free spirited. Now, let me show you in the astrology chart what the rising nakshatra is really fast. I like to give this out in the readings that I do because it does give us important personality characteristics. So in Kamala's case, we would look at where the ascendant is and what degree it's at, and that's how we determine the rising nakshatra. There's 27 nakshatras or stars. So again, Kamala Harris is Mrigasira. Okay. So that's something to consider. And she's also Gemini ascendant. Her moon is in the sign of Aries there in the 11th house, which shows that, she has a career in politics. She's got friendships are going to be very important. And then also, we're going to be taking a look at the planetary timeline, which is known as the Mahadasha and the Antardasha right now. Now, the first thing we're going to be looking at is the Mahadasha for Kamala right now. That's going to be the larger, more it's going to be the more generalized energy, but still we get a lot of information out of it. So she's in a period called Rahu. Rahu actually started back in 2012 for Kamala, and it's going to last until 2030. So it's a pretty long period. It's 18 years for Rahu, and she's in the Rahu. I didn't know if I mentioned that. She's in Rahu Mahadasha. If we look at where Rahu is in Kamala's chart, it's in the first house. So people that have Rahu in their first house, they typically, there's a focus on the self, and it's not necessarily in a selfish sort of way. What it means is with K2 in the 7th house over here, It shows that in past lifetimes, maybe the focus was on others. Maybe the focus was on other people, spouses, partnerships, and there was less focus on the self. In this lifetime or this incarnation, there's more of a focus on developing the self and trying to learn about yourself and trying to really increase and maximize what you do on this planet, essentially. So it's not necessarily selfish. Remember, everyone has a Rahu, and Rahu, inherently Rahu might actually, it's considered a malefic influence in our chart. Sometimes people consider it even demonic. So it does give us a lot of desire associated with the first house. So when Rahu's in the first house, there's somewhat of a desire for elevation, self-elevation, or a raise in social status. A lot of people that have Rahu in the first house, they can become like actors or actresses. So that's something to also think about. So politics would be really good for someone with Rahu in the first house. She also has a few other planets going on in her chart. She's got Sun in the fifth house and Mercury, but Sun is debilitated. That's one of the problems. We're going to talk about that in a little while. And then she's got Moon in the 11th house. So there's a few positive factors as far as politics goes in Kamala's chart. Let's go back and talk about the Rahu Mahadasha a little bit more, because Rahu has the potential to really catapult somebody into a higher station of life. And a lot of times, Rahu can seem like a magical planet in many ways because it just has this ability to really move us forward in life. Let me put up the slide so you all can learn a little bit on what we're doing there. So she's in the Rahu Mahadasha, like I said, 2012 to 2030. It's 18 years of Rahu energy. So that's going to be the energy that's really dominant during this 18 period. But remember, usually the sub period is going to be the more acute energy, the more intense energy. But Rahu's still operating. It still has its agenda. It's still the lord of this whole 18-year period. So Rahu, if you look on the slide, you can catapult you to a higher station in life. It's associated with power vacuums, unconventional ways. So it's in the first house of her chart. So something unconventional happening. It can be very disruptive, unpredictable. It can be very manipulative. So sometimes Rahu can be associated with things like obsessions, or it can be associated with things like conspiracies and really bad cases. But Rahu is associated essentially with trying to achieve our desires. So that's the thing that we're really focused on. Now, when Rahu's in the first house, I did bring up a few points down in the slide that I want to point out. So it can create an intense personality. And because there's an intense personality, it can also create a lot of controversy with that personality. So I've already seen with Kamala just being vice president, there's a lot of people that can have very intense reactions, and that Rahu can cause those kind of reactions. The other thing is someone's very ambitious and driven with Rahu in the first house, and then there's a desire for fame and power when you have Rahu in the first house. So there's a desire for leadership. Whether you like it or not, there is a desire for a leadership there. So that's something to point out. Now we're going to talk about the Venus in a second. But the other thing that we look at when we're looking at Rahu, because Rahu, remember, it's a shadow planet, essentially. It's our karmic destiny. But we want to see what the Lord of Rahu is, because Rahu will influence the house it's in, but it's going to act a lot like the Lord of its house. So in Kamala's case, the Lord of Gemini is going to be Mercury over here in the fifth house. The fifth house it is associated with fame. It is associated with creativity, artists, celebrity, that sort of thing. So that's actually a really good influence to have. The Mercury being in the fifth house, it rules the first house and the fourth house. The only downside is it's associated with a debilitated sun and Mercury's combust. So it's not necessarily a perfect situation there. There's a combustion going on. So with sun being debilitated, this can show some problems. We're going to talk about this at the end of the presentation, why even if she is president, it could bring up a lot of difficulties with being president with sun being debilitated. For example, just getting even though she's Marigasira rising nakshatra, which shows that she can get a lot of support among her peers, the debilitated sun can show, kind of an unpopularity with the masses or some sort of controversy. So that's one of the difficulties there, and also can create an indecisiveness with making executive decisions, which can also create some issues there. So let's go ahead and talk about the sub period right now. The sub period, remember, it's more acute. With this, we're going to be focused on Venus. So Venus. Now, the thing that I was a little bit surprised on is she has this real opportunity to try to get the essentially the biggest title in the land, president of the United States. But Venus, it's in the third house. It rules the 12th house and the fifth house. But usually when I see someone get elevated with this kind of Venus placement, I would want to see something associated with like the 10th house over here, or again, associated with the first house, even though Rahu's in the first house and the Mahadasha Lord is still creating some conditions for the rise of leadership. But still, Venus, it isn't very strong for catapulting somebody to a degree of a leadership. So I did want to point that out. And that's where some of the reservations I'm having about really pushing this. Now, Rahu itself can create a power vacuum or situation where she's put into leadership. But the question is going to be, how long can she stay in leadership? Because Rahu can create situations where you're essentially like a placeholder, or you're an interim president too. You have to have like a supporting planet to really hold that power. So that's something to really point out. Let's go to back to the slide. I want to talk about Venus. So she's in this Venus sub period. This is from February 2024 to 2027. It's a 3-year period. It's a pretty long period when we talk about Antardashas, or what they call Bhuktis in Vedic astrology. Now, Venus, it's usually a time of diplomacy, romance, things like that. Now, that's probably not the main focus in her life at the moment. It's probably going to be more about developing relationships and diplomacy, because remember, Venus rules the natural sign of it rules Libra, and Libra is all about balancing. So this is about balancing, but it does give her the energy of attraction. So Venus can make you very charming. It can make you very pleasing, despite some personality. Maybe some people don't like her personality, but in a general sense, it's going to give you a certain amount of charm. So Venus is going to be helpful in that respect. So Venus is helpful. The thing about it is, I do see she's in the third house. A third house is typically not a big leadership or, rise kind of house. So that's what I have reservations about. I'm like, okay, Rahu could do it. Rahu could create a situation where maybe she's temporarily president. Like, for example, if Joe Biden, if he resigns all of a sudden because of it becomes very acute, even though he might just finish his term and someone else might run, you know, Rahu could create the conditions where she's put in the leadership and she's next in line, obviously. But is she going to be the next president as far as running when 2025 starts? And I'm a little bit hesitant to fully declare that, even though I know Rahu's operating, but the sub period is not that strong. So this is a mixed bag on this reading. And let's go ahead and put this in. Now, she does have the fifth house of creativity, intellect. Fifth house can represent like politicking. She's got the 12th house activated there too. Fifth from moon is activated. Seventh from moon is activated. So I feel like she could get into this position temporarily in some way, whether that's a temporary situation, interim, or it kind of depends who the Democratic Party also has as running for president. So could she take the top spot? I'm going to be surprised actually if she fully takes the top spot to be running, to be honest, when I'm looking at this astrology chart. I will be surprised. I mean, it can happen because of Rahu, but the Venus is not extremely supportive of it, because of the third house and the 12th house factors that I'm seeing in the astrology chart. Let's talk about the debilitated sun. Let me bring that up. And that was one of the things that kind of have me questioning things a little bit with this as well. Let me bring up the chart again. So, like, if you were going to become president of the USA, you would probably want a strong sun or a really strong first lord. And you'll see that her first lord, which is Mercury, is combust, so it's already kind of being weakened. Oh, I forgot to bring up that Venus is also being afflicted by Saturn. So that's another factor too. It's being afflicted by Saturn, which can bring up a lot of obstacles and delays and things like that. And then we have the sun here. There's the Mars aspect happening here, which is kind of afflicting this situation. It's the sixth lord too. So Mercury's being afflicted, sun is being afflicted, and then sun is debilitated as well. So debilitated sun, it's debilitated in the sign of Libra. And I was gonna talk to you all about debilitation, but a lot of times, sun is sun is one of the planets we would generally look at in terms of someone's career or someone's status. So when it's weak, it's like not helping in any way, especially with if we're talking about becoming president. So the debilitated sun can cause indecisiveness, a lack of clarity with decision making, visibility problems. One of the things that I think that Kamala is facing right now is she has a lot of opposition. So there's a lot of people that she's kind of been, in a general sense, unpopular. I think with the general masses, and I'm kind of just going out a limb by saying that. I don't actually have anything against Kamala, but I feel like generally she's kind of unpopular. So visibility problems. So that might be one of the factors they're looking at. Like, okay, do we want her to go for the top spot for 2025? Okay, do we want her to take over this whole thing? That's going to be a little bit issue. And then also with debilitated sun, you can have reputation issues. A debilitated sun can affect one's reputation and public image. I think that's kind of what I was just talking about. And then strained relationships with authority figures. So we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but debilitated sun can create like power struggles with other people. So if there's other like decision makers in the Democratic Party or other people trying to make, it can cause problems there. Now, I do feel like she could get a chance to be a leader. The Rahu period, it can create the conditions to become president. Yes, because Rahu's in the first house and Rahu can create a leadership vacuum. But my issue is, can it maintain that? And that's the big struggle I have with this, with the debilitated sun. Then we have Venus, it's afflicted by Saturn, it's in the third house, it rules the 12th house. So it's not very strong for like maintaining power. And that's one of my issues. But Rahu could create a situation where she gets in from a power vacuum. Because if President Biden, if for some reason he resigns, or if, then that definitely could happen. I'm a little bit hesitant on declaring her being on the top spot on running on the ticket, though. That's the thing that I'm a little bit hesitant with this chart. And if I'm playing it a little bit conservative in this prediction, I just don't think it's really strong. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. And I will be making more videos, of course, on this. The more information we get about what's happening with this election, I'm just going to be putting up more videos, of course. So thank you so much, and I will see you all in the next video.